People always think control starts with shouting. It doesn't. It starts with concern, with a soft voice, with a hand on your shoulder, with someone saying the exact thing you're too tired to argue with. In my case, it started 3 months after my husband died. 3 months of casseroles I didn't ask for. 3 months of cards with the same handwriting saying, "Call me if you need anything," and then never calling again. 3 months of waking up in a quiet house that still smelled like his aftershave if I stood in the hallway long enough. I was tired, not nap tired, soul tired. That's when my son-in-law stepped in. He didn't rush it, didn't push. He waited until a Tuesday afternoon when I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at a stack of unopened mail like it might bite me. Bills, statements, things I used to handle without thinking. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, folding his hands like a counselor. "You shouldn't have to deal with all this," he said gently. "Not right now." I looked up at him. He had that calm, reasonable expression people practice in mirrors. "You've been through enough," he continued. "At your age, stress isn't good for you." There it was, at your age, not cruel, not loud, just placed there like a fact. "I can take care of the finances," he said. "Just for now, let you breathe." I remember hesitating, just for a second. But grief does something funny to your instincts. It dulls them. I thought about my husband, how he used to handle everything without making it feel heavy. I thought about how tired I was of pretending I was fine, so I nodded. "I trust you," I said. I meant it. And that's the part people never talk about. Trust isn't handed over in dramatic moments. It's given quietly when you're worn down and grateful someone is offering to carry something for you. At first, nothing changed. That's how they get you. Bills still got paid. The lights stayed on. The house stayed warm. If anything, life felt smoother, too smooth. Mail stopped piling up on the counter. Late notices disappeared. My daughter would smile and say, "Isn't it nice not having to worry about that stuff anymore?" Nice. That's the word they always use when something's being taken away slowly. My son-in-law started organizing things, online accounts. "Passwords, paperwork, less clutter for you," he said. He began saying we instead of you. "We decided it's better this way. We've got a plan going forward." I noticed I just didn't say anything. Because saying something would have made me sound ungrateful, or worse, confused. And at my age, that's a dangerous word to let people think about you. So I smiled. I let him handle it. I let him take the checkbook for safekeeping. I let him hold onto my debit card so it wouldn't get misplaced. I let my daughter answer questions that were asked directly to me. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself this was what help looked like now. What I didn't know, what no one warned me about, was this: no one takes everything all at once. They take it in pieces, so small you don't feel it happening. Until one day you're standing somewhere public, needing something basic, and suddenly you realize you don't have access to your own life anymore. I didn't know when that moment would come, but looking back now. That Tuesday afternoon at my kitchen table, that's when it started. And they thought I wouldn't notice. That was their first mistake. The quiet didn't arrive all at once. It slipped in slowly, like a draft you don't notice until you're already cold. A week after my son-in-law took over, I realized the mail slot hadn't clanked in days. No envelopes spilling onto the floor, no credit card statements, no utility bills reminding me what day it was. At first, I thought it was a blessing. No stacks, no reminders, no pressure. "That's all digital now," my daughter said when I mentioned it. "We set it up so you don't have to deal with paper anymore." We set it up. I nodded. The house felt different too. Not empty, quiet. Phones stopped ringing. Emails stopped popping up. Even the little calendar by the fridge stopped getting updates. My son-in-law said he'd synced everything to his system. Less stress for you, he told me. You don't need all that noise. Noise. That's what my life had apparently become. I started noticing other things. The mailbox was checked before I got to it. Packages were opened and set aside. Once I found an envelope torn open and neatly stacked on his desk, my name printed right there on the front. I didn't say anything because technically nothing was wrong. The lights were still on. The water still ran. The fridge stayed full. That's how control hides. It keeps things working just well enough that you doubt yourself for feeling uneasy. One afternoon, I asked a simple question. Did the insurance payment go through this month? My son-in-law didn't even look up from his phone. Yep, all good. No details, no numbers, just all good. Another time, I asked about my bank balance. My daughter answered before he could. You don't need to worry about that, Mom. It's handled. Handled. That word again, I smiled and let it go. But later that night, lying in bed, I realized something that made my stomach tighten. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen my own money, not touched it, not counted it, seen it. I used to know exactly what I had, not because I was obsessed, but because it was mine. I earned it, managed it, planned with it. Now I couldn't even tell you where it lived. When I reached into my purse the next morning, my debit card wasn't there. I checked twice, then a third time slower. My son-in-law noticed immediately. Oh, I moved that, he said casually. Didn't want you losing it. It's safer with me, safer. I felt something shift in my chest, not panic, recognition, because safety is supposed to make you feel calmer. This made me feel smaller. Still, I smiled. I told myself I was being dramatic. That grief makes you suspicious. That families help each other like this all the time. But that night, standing in my kitchen with the lights off, I realized how quiet the house had become. Not peaceful, controlled. And somewhere in that silence, a thought settled in that wouldn't leave me alone. If I needed something right now, I wasn't sure I could get it. I didn't know when that would matter. But I had a feeling, a bad one, that the house wasn't quiet by accident. It was quiet because someone had taken my voice out of the room, and they were hoping I wouldn't notice. The first time I tried to push back, it came out wrong. Not angry, not demanding, just careful. We were sitting at the kitchen table, my daughter scrolling on her phone. My son-in-law tapping away on his laptop like he was running a small country instead of my checkbook. I cleared my throat. Can I see the account summary sometime? I asked lightly, just so I know what's where. The room changed. Not dramatically, just enough. My son-in-law paused. My daughter looked up too fast. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Why would you need that? He asked. The question landed heavier than it should have. Well, I said, forcing a little laugh, old habits die hard. I like knowing my numbers. My daughter reached across the table and patted my hand. Mom, she said softly, you don't need to stress yourself out anymore. That's what he's here for. Stress, that word again. It was starting to feel like a leash. My son-in-law leaned back in his chair. We're not hiding anything, he said. It's just you've been through a lot. Grief messes with your head. Messes with your head. I nodded. Because what do you say to that without sounding unstable? After that, I noticed how my questions were treated. If I asked about money, I was tired. If I asked about paperwork, I was overthinking. If I hesitated, I was confused. Everything I did was gently reframed as a symptom. One afternoon, I overheard my daughter on the phone. "She's doing okay," she said quietly. "A little forgetful, but we're managing." Managing. Me, I stood in the hallway holding a basket of laundry, feeling like a child listening outside a doctor's office. That night, I tried something small. I asked where my social security statements were being sent. My son-in-law didn't even blink. I switched them to paperless, way easier. "Could I see them?" He sighed, not loudly, just enough. "Do we really need to go through this again?" Again, I hadn't realized we'd already been through it once. My daughter gave me a look, not angry, not cold, concerned, the kind that makes you second-guess yourself. "Mom," she said gently, "you're safe, you're taken care of, that's what matters." I smiled, because I didn't want to be difficult, I didn't want to be dramatic, and I definitely didn't want to be that mother. But later, in the bathroom, staring at my own reflection, I asked myself a question I hadn't asked out loud yet. Since when did asking about my own money become rude? I thought about all the things I no longer handled. Bills, statements, passwords, logins. I couldn't even remember my online banking username anymore. And the scariest part? If something went wrong, really wrong, I wouldn't even know where to start fixing it. That realization sat heavy in my chest. Still, I told myself this was temporary. They were helping. They loved me. People don't steal from family, right? I had no idea how close I was to finding out how wrong that thought could be. Because the next thing that happened wasn't about numbers or paperwork. It was about something I needed, something small, something urgent. And for the first time, all good wasn't going to be enough. The first thing that disappeared wasn't money. That's what still messes with my head. It was something small, something ordinary, my checkbook. I noticed it one Tuesday morning while looking for a pen. The little drawer by the phone, the one I'd used for years, was too clean, too empty. I stood there longer than I should have, staring like the checks might magically reappear if I blinked hard enough. I knew exactly where I kept it. I always had, so I did what I'd been doing a lot lately. I asked carefully. "Hey," I said from the kitchen doorway, trying to sound casual. "Do you know where my checkbook went?" My son-in-law didn't even look up from his screen. "I took it," he said. "You weren't using it anymore." I waited for the rest of the sentence. It didn't come. "Oh," I said. "Okay, where is it?" He shrugged. "Locked up with the rest of the financial stuff." The rest. Like it was all one big pile now, like it had always been that way. My daughter glanced over and smiled. "It's safer that way, Mom. You don't want checks floating around." Floating around. Like I was just dropping them out of my purse like candy wrappers. I nodded because that's what I'd learned to do. Later that day, I realized something else was gone. The mail, not all of it, just the important-looking stuff. No bank envelopes, no insurance notices, no statements, just grocery flyers and junk mail. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Grief brain, stress, all the excuses they kept handing me. But then, one afternoon, I came home from a walk and saw my son-in-law standing by the mailbox. He already had the mail in his hand. "All set," he said cheerfully, tucking it under his arm. Something about that made my stomach tighten. That night, lying in bed, I replayed little moments. How he'd started answering the phone when banks called. How he'd changed my mailing address to theirs temporarily. How he'd insisted it was easier if everything went through him. None of it was aggressive. That was the scary part. It was smooth, polite, reasonable, like boiling water you don't notice until it's too late. The next morning, I tried something. I told my daughter I was expecting a letter from my insurance company. "Oh," she said quickly, "we already got it." "We," she smiled again. I meant he did. Everything's handled. Handled. That word was starting to sound like a door closing. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I wasn't broke. I wasn't confused. I wasn't incapable. But somehow, step by step, I was becoming invisible in my own life. I thought about my husband, how he used to say, if you don't hold your own keys, someone else is driving. I didn't even have the keys to my money anymore. Still, I told myself I was overreacting, because nothing bad had happened yet. No overdrafts, no late bills, no scary phone calls. Everything looked fine on the surface. That's how traps work. They don't snap shut right away. They wait until you need to move, and the very next thing I needed was something I couldn't put off. The first time I had to ask for my own money, I told myself it was temporary. Just one of those awkward moments families have when things are in transition. That's the word they loved, transition. It sounds gentle, harmless. Like you're moving forward. I was standing in the kitchen holding a folded flyer from the community center. They were running a winter heating assistance program, nothing dramatic, just paperwork help and a small rebate for seniors. My husband used to handle things like that for me. After he passed, I was still figuring out what I handled myself. I'm going to need about $200, I said lightly, setting the flyer down. The application fee and copies. My son-in-law looked up slowly. For what? I explained, slowly, clearly. Calm, he didn't interrupt. He just listened with that same polite face he always wore now, the one that made it hard to tell what he was thinking. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. That's not really necessary, he said. We're already covering your expenses. Covering, I felt my throat tighten just a bit. I know, I said, but this is my rebate. It's not extra spending. He exchanged a quick glance with my daughter, then he sighed, not angry, not loud, worse, tired. Mom, my daughter said softly, like she was talking to a child who didn't understand bedtime. You don't need to worry about this stuff anymore. That's the whole point. The point? I nodded. Again, he pulled out his phone, tapped for a moment, then said, I'll see what I can do. See what I can do, not yes, not no. Just permission pending. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, staring at my hands. They were steady. That's what scared me. I wasn't confused. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was being managed. An hour later, he knocked on my door. I transferred 100, he said. That should be plenty. 100. Half of what I asked for. I smiled. I thanked him. I meant it because gratitude had become my armor. But inside, something shifted. That night, I opened my purse and counted the cash inside. $87, that was it. No debit card, no credit card, no checkbook, just enough money to survive quietly. I thought back to something my husband once told me after his mother got taken advantage of by a cousin. Control doesn't show up as chains, he'd said. It shows up as convenience. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. I realized something that made my chest feel tight and cold at the same time. If I needed money urgently, if something unexpected happened, if I needed help fast, I couldn't act. I'd have to ask. In the scariest part, they didn't even think they were doing anything wrong, because to them, I wasn't a woman who had lived a full life. I was a responsibility, and responsibilities don't get choices, not until something breaks. It happened at dinner. That's usually where truth slips out between bites, when people relax and forget to pretend. My daughter was talking about a vacation they were planning, somewhere warm, somewhere expensive. I wasn't really listening until I heard my name. "We'll have to see what Mom's situation looks like by then," she said, casually, like she was talking about the weather. My son-in-law nodded. "Yeah, it depends how she's doing." I set my fork down slowly. "I'm doing fine," I said, keeping my voice light. "I walk every morning. Doctor says my numbers are great." They both smiled, the same smile. "That's not what we mean," my daughter said gently. "You know, long term, there it was again, that soft language, that careful tone people use when they think they're being kind. My son-in-law added, "We just need to be realistic. We're making decisions with everyone's future in mind." Everyone's. I wanted to ask what part of my future involved not knowing my own bank balance. I wanted to ask when helping turned into deciding. But instead, I didn't. I just nodded and took another bite of food that suddenly tasted like nothing. That night, something small but important happened. I stopped correcting them. When they said, "We pay your bills," I didn't say, "It's my money." When they said, "We decided," I didn't ask, "Why wasn't I asked?" When they said, "Don't worry about it," I didn't push back. Because I realized something. Every correction made them defensive. Every question made them tighten their grip. So I did what women like me learn how to do very well. I observed, I listened, and I kept my mouth shut. I noticed how my son-in-law checked his phone whenever money came up. I noticed how my daughter avoided eye contact when I asked about paperwork. I noticed how phrases like "for your own good" showed up more and more. That phrase is dangerous. It lets people sleep at night. Later that week, my neighbor stopped by. She asked if I wanted to join her for coffee. "I'd love to," I said honestly. Then I hesitated. "I'll have to see if I have enough cash." She laughed. "Girl, you've always been the responsible one. Since when do you have to check?" I laughed too, because what else could I do? After she left, I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed again. Same spot, same quiet. Only this time I wasn't scared. I was alert. They thought I was fading. They thought I was grateful. They thought compliance meant weakness. But what they didn't realize, not for 1 second, was this. I had stopped fighting them because I had started planning. And when someone underestimates you, that's when you get dangerous. I decided to test something, not confrontational, not dramatic, just quiet. One afternoon, I told my daughter I needed to refill a prescription. Nothing optional, blood pressure meds. The kind you don't skip unless you want real trouble. "I'll go tomorrow," I said casually. "I'll just use my card." She froze just for half a second, then she said, "Oh, don't worry about that. We already switched all pharmacy payments to automatic." "Automatic," I smiled. "That's helpful. Which card is it charging?" She hesitated, then looked at her husband. He answered for her. "It's easier if it comes from the main account," he said. "Keeps everything clean." Clean, that word again, I nodded. "Of course." The next morning I waited, no reminder, no message, no confirmation. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I took the bus. I went to the pharmacy myself. When the pharmacist handed me the bag, she smiled. "That'll be $38.72. I reached into my purse, pulled out the debit card my son-in-law had given me weeks ago. The one he said was linked to everything. I slid it across the counter. The machine beeped. Once, twice. Then the screen flashed red. "Declined," the pharmacist frowned. "Do you want to try again?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, "that won't help." She lowered her voice. "Do you have another card?" I didn't. I paid in cash, almost all of it. As I walked out, my hands were shaking. Not because I was embarrassed, because now I knew this wasn't oversight, this wasn't organization, this was control. That afternoon, I didn't say anything. I waited. That evening, I mentioned it lightly at dinner. "Oh," my son-in-law said, not even looking surprised. "Yeah, I froze that card." I blinked. "You what?" "It was being used outside the budget," he said calmly. "We're trying to keep things streamlined." Streamlined. My daughter jumped in quickly. "It's just temporary, Mom. He didn't want you worrying about small expenses." Small expenses. Medication. I nodded slowly, staring at my plate. Inside, something went very still. Because now there was no doubt. They weren't helping me manage money. They were deciding when I got access to my own life. And the worst part, they hadn't even told me. That night, I sat alone in my room, holding the empty prescription bottle in my hand. I realized something important. They thought I needed protection, but what I actually needed was proof, and I had just gotten it. After the pharmacy incident, I did something very deliberate. I acted normal. I thanked them for dinner. I laughed at the TV. I asked my daughter about work. I didn't bring up the card again. That silence, it made them comfortable. People relax when they think they've won. What they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that I still had something they'd forgotten about. My old phone, not the new one my son-in-law upgraded for me. The old flip-style smartphone I'd kept in the bottom drawer of my dresser. No banking apps, no tracking, no shared passwords, just calls, just texts, and one very important contact. My husband's friend, Carol. Carol had worked in finance for over 30 years. She wasn't flashy, but she was sharp as hell. The kind of woman who read contracts for fun and never trusted family arrangements without paperwork. That night I called her. "Hey," I said lightly. "Quick question. If someone freezes your card without telling you, what does that mean?" She didn't laugh. She didn't hesitate. "Margaret," she said slowly, "that means someone has authority you didn't knowingly give them." My stomach tightened. I told her everything: the missing mail, the checkbook, the frozen card, the main account. There was a long pause, then she said, "Honey, do you know exactly what you signed?" My heart thudded. "Yes," I said quickly. "It was just to help manage things." "Did you read it?" I didn't answer. "Did you keep a copy?" "No." Her voice softened, but it got serious. "Then you need one now." The next morning, I casually asked my daughter if I could see the paperwork I'd signed. "Oh, that stuff," she said breezily. "It's all digital now." "Digital, of course it was." "Still," I said with a smile, "I'd feel better having a copy." She exchanged a look with her husband. He nodded. "I'll send it later." Later never came. That was all I needed to know. That afternoon, I went back to my room, closed the door, and pulled out a small envelope taped to the back of my dresser drawer. Inside was something I'd kept without even realizing how important it would become. A folder my husband had labeled years ago, just in case. It had account numbers, a list of contacts, and one thing that made my breath catch. A note in his handwriting: "Never sign anything you don't keep. If someone rushes you, they're hiding something." I sat on the bed holding that note, feeling something I hadn't felt since he passed. Grounded. They thought they had everything. They thought I was dependent, but they didn't know about Carol. They didn't know about the old phone. And they definitely didn't know I was about to ask for help, the kind that doesn't come with strings. And once you do that, control starts slipping, quietly. The next morning, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't accuse. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask questions. I made coffee. I watched the news. I folded laundry like everything was fine. Because once people think you've accepted your place, they stop watching you. That's when you move. I waited until the house was empty. Then I called Carol again. "I need copies," I said quietly. Of everything. She didn't ask questions. She never does. Within an hour, she was on the phone with her bank contacts, walking me through things slowly, clearly, like she was teaching a class. First, she said, we're going to pull your credit report. I laughed nervously. Why? Because if someone's confident enough to freeze your card, she said, they're confident enough to open things in your name. That thought hit me like a slap. She talked me through it step by step. When the report came up on my screen, my heart started pounding. There it was, a line of credit I didn't recognize, a balance that wasn't small, an address that wasn't mine. My hands went cold. That's not me, I whispered. I know, Carol said. Now we document. She had me screenshot everything, dates, account numbers, authorizations. Then she asked something that made my stomach drop. Did your mail ever stop coming? Yes, I said immediately. Months ago, there was a pause. That explains it. She explained how easy it is when someone controls your mail, your cards, and your access. How clean it looks on paper, how slow it happens. How long? I asked. Long enough, she said gently. That afternoon, I went through my dresser, every drawer, every envelope, every old file. I found things I hadn't seen in years, a medical form I never remembered signing, a banking letter-stamped duplicate copy requested, a notice marked online access granted. My name was on everything, my signature too, but I hadn't signed them knowingly. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments. The rush. The smiles, the way they told me it's all handled. Handled by people who thought I wouldn't notice. By people who thought grief meant weakness. By people who forgot one very important thing. I raised a daughter. I paid bills for decades. I survived more than they knew. And now I had proof, not drama, not guesses, paper. And paper has a way of changing everything. Because the moment you stop being emotional and start being documented, power shifts. Quietly, permanently. Once you have proof, the hardest part isn't finding the truth. It's acting like you don't know it yet. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table across from my son-in-law, sipping coffee like always. Same mug, same chair. Same routine. Inside, though, my heart was beating slow and steady, the way it does when you're done being scared. Morning, he said, scrolling through his phone. Morning, I replied, pleasant as ever. My daughter rushed around the kitchen, late for work, kissing my cheek on her way out. Don't forget your doctor appointment today, Mom. He'll take care of the payment. Take care of, I smiled. Of course. After they left, the house went quiet. That's when I started practicing, not lines, not speeches, expressions. I practiced looking grateful, practiced sounding unsure. Practiced asking small questions like I didn't already know the answers. Because I understood something now. If I showed even a hint that I knew what they'd done, they'd lock everything down tighter. Change passwords. Move money, rewrite access. So I waited. That afternoon, I casually asked my son-in-law if we could go over the budget together sometime. He laughed, actually laughed. Why would you want to stress yourself out with that? He said. That's what I'm here for. There it was. The arrogance. He thought the game was over. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. I wouldn't confront them, not yet. I would let them believe they were still in control. Because when people think they're safe, they make mistakes. They talk too much, they move too fast, they get sloppy. And I needed one more thing, not for revenge, for protection. I needed someone official. Someone who didn't care about family dinners or hurt feelings. Someone who only cared about facts. The next morning, while they were out, I made one phone call from my old phone, just one. Hello, I said calmly. I believe my finances are being misused, and I need to know my options." The woman on the other end didn't gasp, didn't judge, didn't rush me. She just said, "Okay, let's start from the beginning." And in that moment, I knew. They still thought they were managing me, but the truth, I was already planning my exit, and they had no idea what was coming. The woman I spoke to on the phone didn't rush me. That alone told me everything. She asked my age. She asked who lived in the house. She asked who had access to my accounts. Then she asked one question that made my chest tighten. "Do you feel afraid to ask for your own money?" I didn't answer right away because fear wasn't exactly the word. "I feel small," I said finally, "like I'm inconveniencing them by existing." There was a pause. "That's financial abuse," she said gently, "and you're not imagining it." I sat very still, holding the phone. No one had said that out loud before, not my friends, not my doctor, not even Carol. Abuse. It felt heavy, serious, real. She explained my options slowly. Documentation, protection, oversight. How these situations often start with help and end with isolation. "You're not trapped," she said, "but timing matters." Timing, that word stuck with me. Because when I hung up, I realized something important. The questions were about to start. That evening at dinner, my son-in-law seemed distracted. He kept checking his phone. His jaw was tight. My daughter noticed too. "Everything okay?" she asked him. "Yeah," he said quickly, "just bank stuff." Bank stuff, I almost smiled. Later that night, he knocked on my door. "Hey," he said casually, leaning against the frame. "Quick thing. Have you talked to anyone about money lately?" There it was. I looked up at him, confused on purpose. "Talk to anyone?" He shrugged. "Just wondering, a bank flagged some activity, probably nothing." I nodded slowly. "Oh, I wouldn't know anything about that." He watched my face carefully. I kept it soft, mild, unconcerned. "Well," he said after a moment, "if anyone calls you, just send them to me. Easier that way." "Easier," I smiled. "Of course." When he left, I sat there for a long time, listening to his footsteps fade. They were nervous now, not panicked, but aware. And that meant I was closer than ever to the moment I'd been waiting for. Because when people start checking on you, it means they're afraid of what you might say, and I had already decided. I wasn't going to say a word, not yet. I didn't rush the next step. That was the hardest part. When you finally see what's being done to you, every instinct screams to expose it, to confront, to demand answers. But I'd learned something watching my son-in-law all these months. Power doesn't shout, power waits, so I waited. 2 days passed, then 3, and then on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the call came. Not from a bank, not from a creditor, from my doctor's office. The receptionist said politely, "We're calling to confirm your insurance details. There's been a change on file." My stomach tightened. "What kind of change?" I asked. "Well," she hesitated, "the primary contact and payment authorization were updated last month." Updated? "I didn't authorize any changes," I said calmly. There was silence on the line. "Then we'll need to freeze the account until this is clarified," she replied carefully. "Yes," I said, "please do." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. Because now it wasn't just my word. Systems were noticing, records were flagging, questions were being asked. That evening, my son-in-law came home early. Too early. He didn't take off his shoes, didn't grab a drink. Just stood there in the living room like he was waiting for a verdict. "Did you get any calls today?" he asked. I looked up from my book. "From who?" He hesitated. Anyone, doctor's office, insurance. Banks, I tilted my head like I was thinking. Oh, I said lightly. Yes, the doctor's office called. His shoulders stiffened. And they said something about freezing things until everything's clarified. The room went very quiet. That's inconvenient, he said slowly. For who? I asked gently. He looked at me then, really looked. Not like a burden, not like a responsibility, like a variable he hadn't accounted for. I'll handle it, he said quickly. You don't need to get involved. I closed my book. I think I do, I said calmly. My daughter appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension. What's going on? Nothing, he said too fast. Just a mix-up. I smiled at her. Sweetheart, I said, when did you decide I didn't need to know what was happening with my own life? Her face drained of color. No one answered, and that's when I knew the balance had shifted. They weren't in control anymore, they were reacting. And once someone starts reacting, they're already losing. The house felt different after that. Quieter, tighter, like everyone was waiting for someone else to blink first. My son-in-law started hovering, offering help I hadn't asked for, explaining things before I questioned them. Checking in just a little too often. Control doesn't disappear overnight, it panics. The next afternoon, he asked if we could talk. Those were his words, talk. We sat at the dining table, the same one where I'd signed papers months ago without really reading them. Sunlight came through the window, catching dust in the air. It felt almost peaceful. That's how these moments get you. I think things got a little out of hand, he began, folding his hands like a mediator. We were just trying to help. I nodded slowly. I know, that threw him off. But help doesn't mean deciding for me, I continued. And it doesn't mean changing things without my consent. He shifted in his chair. You gave consent, did I? I asked gently. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I leaned forward just a little. Tell me exactly what authority I signed away. Silence. My daughter sat beside him, eyes darting between us. I could see it on her face, the realization that this wasn't going the way they'd planned. I trusted you, I said, because I was grieving, because I was tired, because you're family. He cleared his throat. We can fix this, put things back. No need to make it bigger than it is. That was the moment, the exact moment I knew they still didn't get it. I'm not trying to make it bigger, I said calmly. I'm trying to make it right. I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me. Set it on the table, didn't open it. I've spoken to professionals, I said. People who don't care who we are to each other, they care about what's legal. My son-in-law's face tightened. My daughter whispered, Mom. I held up my hand. This isn't a punishment, I said. It's a correction. I stood up, pushing my chair in neatly. I'll be taking back control of my finances, all of them, immediately. He looked like he wanted to argue, then he saw my face, not angry. Not shaking, certain. Any resistance, I added softly, will only make things worse for everyone. I walked away before anyone could respond. That night I slept better than I had in months. Because for the first time since my husband died, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I had already stopped it. And tomorrow would be about rebuilding on my terms. Freedom didn't arrive with applause. There was no dramatic apology, no emotional hug, no moment where everyone suddenly understood what they'd done. It arrived quietly, in paperwork, in signatures, in access being restored. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed slowly, methodically, permanently. My accounts were separated, new passwords created, mail rerouted back to me, cards reissued in my name only. The first time I logged into my own bank account again, I just sat there staring at the screen. Not because of the numbers, but because of what they represented. Choice. I paid my own bills. I scheduled my own appointments. I bought groceries without explaining myself. And one afternoon, this part still gets me, I went back to the same pharmacy. Same counter, same clerk. When she said the total, I slid my card across without a word. The machine beeped, approved. She smiled. I smiled back. That was it. No victory speech. No revenge, just dignity restored. My relationship with my daughter is different now. Quieter. Careful, we don't pretend nothing happened. We also don't fight about it. Some trust doesn't come back the same shape once it's broken. And that's okay. What matters is this. I learned something I wish I'd known earlier. Being helped should never cost you your voice. Being loved should never require surrendering control. And being older does not mean being invisible. If you're listening to this and something in your gut feels familiar, that tight feeling when someone says, "I'll handle it," please hear me. Pay attention to that feeling. It's not paranoia, it's wisdom. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Voice of Granny June. Your support helps these stories reach people who might need to hear them right now. And if you've lived through something similar, leave a comment. You'd be surprised how many people are silently nodding along with you. Thank you for sitting with me until the end. Take care of yourself. No one else will do it better than you.